Hey, Lawrence here. Welcome to another Business Beats episode. Today, we're doing a Q&A session. A few questions around business, how to build a business, how to scale a business, and working 70 hours a week. How do you handle that and how do you deal with that? So let's dive in. Now, I've selected a few questions here, ones that I think are relevant and ones that I think I can add some value on, right, that I've experienced over my years as an entrepreneur as well. So let's dive into that. It says here, I purchased a business turning over $5,000 a week. Kudos to you. Where do I start and how do I increase sales? My goal is $10,000 per week, right? So I purchased a business turning over 5K a week. Where do I start and how do I increase sales? My goal is $10,000 a week. Okay, so yeah, interesting. Without all the context, it's really hard to answer specifically, but I would say, why is your goal $10,000 a week? And the second thing I would say to you is, why are you purchasing a business and you don't know where to start? Two things there, right? So my advice would be, before you purchase a business, you need to know where you're going to head with it, right? Where you're going to go, what you were going to do with it, what the goal is, the outcome, the business plan, all that sort of stuff, right? You have to have some sort of strategy wrapped around that. Otherwise, you're just purchasing a business and, which is cool, right? Like I've said before, I just dive in and figure the rest out later. Like that is a bit of a loose strategy, but I like it because it's got a lot of energy to it. And that feels sort of good to me. And I'm pretty old school, so I'm used to that. But if I was to formally wrap some context around that for you as a business owner, you really need to do your homework before you purchase any business, right? That would be my advice. You need to understand the P&L, the balance sheet, what the business plan looks like, what stock, inventory, dispatch. I don't know what sort of business it is, whether it's a service business or a product, dispatch business, retail business. So understand all the variables and all the elements around it. Really, really critical to get that right. And I think people don't do that, like Pam in the pie shop, they just dive into setting the pie shop up. So just pull back a little bit. So my advice would be to do that. However, you purchase a business that's turned over $5,000 a week. So that's great, right? That's I think that's pretty good depending on what your OpEx is, right? So the first thing I would do if I purchased a business is I would seek a good accountant, go through the P&Ls. That would be my first go-to, right? I want to understand what the expenses of the business are, what are your overheads are. So standing charges and operating expenses, right? Those two variables, right? I personally like to know that. So a standing charge is an expense that you are going to incur when the doors are closed, all right? So if you're a retail business and you shut for 4 weeks a year, what expenses do you incur within that 4 weeks that you still have to pay, all right? Because you've got to even that out across the P&L and across the forecast and across your targeting, actually. So try and figure that out quickly, right? And then your OpEx, operating expenditure. So these are costs that you only incur when the business is churning, when the doors are open, right? And you're making money, because that'll come off your gross and your net revenue, right? So you want to look at the right gross percentage, and it should be in alignment with the operating expenditure, including standing charges and operating expenses. Then you can work out your net profitability, right? So you got to get those things right. Get a good accountant. If you've got one, great. Pull all the data from the accountancy system. I don't know how long the business has been running, but say it's 12 months. Great, you've got 12 months worth of data. So you can see, and when you do that, what will happen is you'll see peaks and troughs throughout the course of the year and plan your forecast against that, right? That would be my first piece of advice. Really important to get the numbers right. Without getting the numbers right, you're operating the business emotionally, and I think that's going to be really dangerous for you. Now, if you want to go from $5,000 to $10,000, that's 2x. How did you come up with that number? It's a very clean number, by the way. What I understand about entrepreneurs and business owners is that when they choose a number and it's a nice rounded number, they have put no thought into it. Really, that's just how it is. Like, how much do you want to earn? $1 million. Okay, great. Exactly $1 million. Is that correct? So I'm just going to do a hypothetical here. So if you're selling iPhones, right? You have a unit price, right? So there's two things that you can do. You can sell more of the unit price, or you can sell the same amount of the unit price as the P&L dictated in last year, but increase the margin on it, right? So what that means is you have to lift prices. So those are the two things that you can do. The third thing that you can apply to that is increase advertising. So get out of obscurity and move into attraction. So attract customers, whether they're walking into your bricks and mortar shop or you're advertising online and you're getting more clicks through to your website. You have to either do that. So you're increasing lead count, you're selling more units for the same cost, so the retail cost or whatever that may be, or you're not doing all the marketing and putting all the money into spend, but you're just going to increase the margin. So you might go from $1,000 to $1,100 or $1,200. Now, to do that, you've got to do your market research, right? Without the market research, you could tank in the market where you've got a lot of competitors around you, and they'll just go and buy it somewhere else because they don't care about the serviceability. They just care about buying the product for the best price. So without knowing contextually what your product is or service is, it's really hard to determine. But a couple of things there, right? Know your stuff before you buy the business. Do your due diligence, 100%. Make sure you do that. Now, if you don't know anything about business, go and do a course, tap into your accountant, right? And learn, read books, do whatever you need to do. The next thing is if you want to 2x the revenue, that's a big call. So get your numbers right. Why do you need to 2x it? Maybe you want to increase the gross profitability of the business by 25%. That's a much more tangible way to approach it because that means and that 25% increase over the year, you're going to learn a great deal, and maybe next year you can 2x that, right? So now you're 2xing the 1.25 as opposed to the 1. So think about that. And then look, you can either increase the cost of the product or the service, maintain the status quo, or increase the units that you're going to sell. So if you're selling pies, you sell 100 pies a month, you need to sell 150 pies or 200 pies. How do you do that? Start to think like that and educate yourself. I hope that helped. Next question. I've got one, this is a good one. I picked this out because I really resonate with this. It says here, I'm working 70 hours a week and grinding it out, and it doesn't seem like I'm getting any further ahead. What am I doing wrong? So I'm working 70 hours a week, grinding it out, and I don't seem to be getting any further ahead. What am I doing wrong? Yeah, that's a good question, right? There's a lot in that. We could probably do a whole episode on that. Well, first thing, kudos to you for doing 70 hours a week. You know, the average human works no more than 50, and really the bigger number probably is a 40-hour week, right? So you're almost 2xing what the average human would do in an FTE, right, as an FTE. So kudos to you, and I think business owners should be working 70 hours a week. In fact, you know, what are you doing with the other 30 hours a week, right? That was a joke. So look, I would work about 100 hours a week. Not always, but you know, certainly 70 hours a week. I would work 70 hours a week. And as I've said before, be careful of burnout. You know, now I know that I don't believe in burnout, so that probably doesn't happen for me. I think there's moments of higher frustration and lower frustration and zero frustration. But I'm certainly not like a burnout guy. But if you feel like you're a burnout person, and you could be, which is no harm, no foul, that's cool. You need to really start to unpack what you're doing in 70 hours. That would be my advice. Because what it tells me, if you've been doing 70 hours for 12 months and the business is not growing or moving further ahead, that means you're doing the wrong thing in the 70 hours that you're utilizing. So you need to unpack it. My advice, how you do that? Well, write it down. As I said, it's like a king's audit, right? And a few guys speak about this, and it's something that I've done a few times, is write down what you're doing every day. And really unpack that. Like, you know, how long do you spend to get to work? How many meetings are you in? What are you attributing to administration every day? How long do you have for lunch? When do you leave? When do you go to the gym? How long do you put into that? And then once you've done that, you'll get if you did that for 5 days, you'll get a relatively good understanding, because what I know from people is they're creatures of habit. They will normally do the same thing every week, which is cool, right? Consistency does win the game, so there's nothing wrong with that. But here's the problem with that statement, is if your consistency is the wrong type of consistency, it'll break the bank, 100%. Because you won't get any lift out of it, right? And then you'll get frustrated because you're working so hard and you're tired all the time, and you can't even lean into, yeah, but look how great the business is going. You know, without that, is psychologically where the stress will come in, right? And as soon as you open the door slightly, it tends to flood pretty quick, right? So my advice would be unpack your 70 hours, do a king's audit on that, do it for 5 days. You might want to do it for 10, do it for 30, whatever floats your boat, right? But do it, because without the data, you can't fix it. Now you might want to try and fix it on what you think it may be, but in most cases you'll probably be wrong. So unpack what you're doing with your time, and then you have to align that time to what's your strategy or your business plan. So if you're doing things that are not in the business plan or in the strategy, why are you doing them in the first place? And what I normally find, I call it shiny object syndrome, right? Where people are just, they get in the business. Now, I don't know how many people you have in your business, say it's 10 people, right? And they're knocking on your door every 5 minutes. And the problem is, every time they do that, they interrupt you. And then you get distracted, and then you start chasing the shiny object for half of the day. And then when you get back to doing what you want to do, you forgot what that was, or you were interrupted, now you've lost focus. And then you go, oh, well, hey, look, it's time for lunch now. I'll just go and have lunch. And then you come back and you're on a different pathway for the day. So you've really got to figure out and be disciplined, right, with your day. Hone into it, get laser focused. And if someone knocks on your door, lock your door, right? Tell your team, hey guys, I'm out for 2 hours. No interruptions, only emergencies, right? So there's a lot of things you could do. You could get out of the office, right? Go and find a place. I used to actually go to a hotel down the road. They had a cafe up on the rooftop bar, and I'd sit there for 3 hours just working. I'd go and sit in, go to a health center and sit in a hyperbaric oxygen tank for 60 minutes and smash out a whole bunch of admin or do some thinking, right, and some research. So you've just got to figure that out. Stop doing the 70 hours and burning yourself out. If you are being highly successful doing 70 hours, there is no burnout because success sort of depreciates it, right? So I hope that have a think about that. Next question. Okay, I'm struggling with managing my team. They don't seem to get it or listen. Any tips? So I'm struggling with managing my team. They don't seem to get it. Any tips? Yeah, good question. I actually hear that a lot. So it's good subject matter to talk about. My first thing would be, look, again, I don't have any context around the question. My first thing would be, in terms of what an entrepreneur or a leader or a founder or a CEO is, right? We're the guys who take all the shit, all the tough situations, all the pain, and we have to take responsibility for it, all right? That's just how it is. Don't be a founder if you're not prepared to take any responsibility, because what'll happen in that environment is you'll break, right? Because it's pretty tough and it's pretty lonely, right? I've spoken about this a lot. And I'm pretty passionate about it, especially this vertical subject matter, because I think business is communication. And if you can't build a team successfully, it'll be tough, right? And I think most people get promoted or go into business without the right communication or psychological acumen, right? Like they haven't done any formal qualifications around communication. EQ, emotional intelligence, and all these types of really, really important verticals that most people don't really talk about, and they should, but they don't, just because it's not on the table for most. If you're an EXO organization and you're one of those exponential businesses running that type of methodology, then you certainly would be doing that. But small business owners just don't do that, right? Like the person before who had bought a $5,000 business. I would pretty much guarantee that in that business, communication will eventually become a problem as that business 2Xs, right? So if there were 3 people and then there were 6, or there were 10 people and then there were 20, like that's a big jump, right? Just think how more effective. Well, look, here's a good way to look at it. If I purchased a business and there were 10 people in it and I'm struggling with communication, what do you think happens when it goes to 20? So my time across communication dilutes itself, right? That means it'll get worse. So the first 10 people will find you to be worse in communication, and the second 10 people will catch up with that. So it's critical to get it right, especially if you're the only person in the business who is the leader. Normally as a founder, you're the HR person, the IT person, the sales guy, the BD guy, and the commercial manager, right? You're all of those things, and you sort of have to be, and there's nothing wrong with that. But communication will get you through it. And here's what I mean by that, is that it is so critical. I highly advise all business owners to undergo some type of communication or leadership program, 100%, because you're not born with leadership skills. I know some people are naturally born with that personality type, I get that, and there's probably something inherent with that, but when you're born, you can't talk, right? So it's all about how your synapses fires, how your brain processes, and at what speed does that happen. And then what was your social influence and your learning through your formal education, and did you go to university, and all these sorts of things, right? All of that will make up your communication style as you get older. And if you have had a great version of that or a poor version, will sort of depend on where you land. Now, I'm just going to assume if you've got a poor version to that, because what I'm hearing in a question, even though it's that short, is that it's not about your staff. It's probably about you, right? So take that on the chin, right? It's not your staff, it's you. So if you're communicating to your staff and they're not getting it, it's probably because you're communicating it in a way that they don't understand. I'll say that one more time. It's a pretty important lesson to learn as a business owner, is that if you're communicating to your staff and they don't get it, it's because you're communicating the wrong way. All right, so unpack that and think about that. There's books you can read around that for sure, 100%. Like you can learn that, right? But it's critical, and that's a lesson I've had to learn over and over again in my career. So I just sometimes need to communicate a different way. Sometimes I speak pretty fast, and half of the room will get it, and the other half have no idea what I'm talking about. I might walk into sales and start talking about, a customer survey or something like that, and we should be doing this, and half of the team get confused, and the other half understand it, right? So what you could do is break it down into fractions, right? You probably know who gets you and who doesn't, right? So the ones who do, you continue on that track. And the ones who don't, maybe you just have to do one thing. And that's just to those few people, communicate differently. Or break it up into one-on-one conversations. A couple of hacks, when you speak to someone who you think doesn't get it, or they don't understand, or they're not listening to you, take them away for a couple of minutes and ask them why, or get them to repeat back to you the instructions that you've just given them, right? Because here's the thing, people in a group don't want to look stupid. So they're always going to say, does that make sense to everyone? They're all going to go, yeah, absolutely. And then they're going to go back to their desk and scratch their head and goes, what the fuck was he talking about? So you have to be very careful. But that's on you as a founder. That's your fault and your responsibility, right? So you have to do that. So take it on the chin, take it as your responsibility, and take those people aside and unpack it with a little bit more detail with them, and ask them, hey, when I'm talking, do you understand what I'm talking about? It's okay if you don't, so give them permission, but talk to me about that. And they might say, every time you talk, I have no idea what you're talking about because I don't understand this component. And then you can work with them over time. That would be my advice. Just go slow with those people. Look, that's all we've got time for today. I hope that helps. So 3 questions we smashed out there. Keep sending those through. Happy to answer those as many as we can. We've got a few starting to come through now. So every couple of weeks I'll try and get to those. Hey, we're not for a profit organization. So we appreciate it if you subscribe. We're trying to get to X amount of subscriptions. Look, we're feeling you, but we're working hard to deliver better quality information out there. So we'd appreciate your support and subscribe so you can get the notifications every time we release something, which is every week. Thanks again for joining. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to speaking to you next time. Cheers. All right, I'm done. Hey, that was fun. I'm out of here.